Well, councillors, welcome to the ordinary council meeting, 22nd of October 2020. The meeting is being live zoomed, and it's a big welcome to all of you who are present. I'd ask Paul if he could do the opening karakia. We have no apologies at present, although I'm aware that Francois is going to be late. Apology? Okay. So we have an apology for lateness from Francois. No, we don't. He's right. Are there any other apologies? Or are there any apologies? So no, thank you very much. Move on to item 3, which is the declarations of interest. The interest register is on Team Systems, and of course you can update it online. It is here. I'll pass it around. Once again, any matter that you feel is even remotely as a remote conflict, put it in. It's a lot easier to be safe than sorry. Move on to item 4. Are there any urgent items not on the agenda? Councillor Martin.
Through your worship, good afternoon everyone. I'd like us to discuss a time where we can progress the correspondence that we've had around 2 rating matters, one being the contiguous land matter and the other being the Aero Club. And I understand there's a discussion in a staff report today on confidential about community rates. But I would appreciate if we could please organise a time to progress that correspondence. Thank you, Your Worship.
We have, there has been a discussion about having a workshop on it, and both of those matters will be raised in the workshop, and so we can work through them in detail. They're complex, and Chief Executive, do you have anything to?
I'd like to pass to Leslie in terms of the Aero Club discussion, that is in confidential delay, that covers that topic.
Yep, great.
In terms of the second part, we'll
So the idea is to bring a report to next council meeting on the contiguous matters with our legal opinion.
So thank you. There's a formal report for council next meeting. Sure.
Happy with that, councillors? Okay. So there are no other matters should be on the agenda. Okay, we'll move on to item 5 on today's agenda, and it's the minutes. And the first set of minutes, the ordinary council meeting minutes of the meeting on the 24th of September 2020. They have been circulated to councillors. They are on Teams. At this stage, we've had no feedback as to any changes required. Are there any changes required? Would someone like to move that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 24th of September 2020 be confirmed as a true and correct record of the meeting? Councillor Neal, thank you. Councillor Hart, those in favour? Aye. The next set of minutes are the extraordinary council meeting minutes on the 28th of September 2020. Once again, the minutes have been circulated to councillors. They're live on Team Systems. There's been no feedback. Is there any discussion required? In that case, I'd ask that someone move that the minutes of the extraordinary council meeting held on the 28th of September 2020 be confirmed as a true and correct record of the meeting. Asking Councillor Kennedy, second please. Councillor Cogan, thank you. Those in favour?
Aye.
On that basis, I approve that my digital signature be added to the confirmed ordinary council meeting minutes of the 24th of September 2020 and the extraordinary council meeting minutes held on the 28th of September 2020. Now move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is the action list. And councillors, it's on pages 6 to 7 of your agenda, and we'll hand over to the Chief Executive.
Yeah, good afternoon, councillors. A lovely sunny day out there. I'd just like to take you through item by item of the council action list. So, Carnegie School Student Cycleway Trail. The location of the crossing itself was raised at the last council meeting. Staff have reassessed the position of the crossing and have confirmed that it is in the correct location in terms of its line of sight. And the crossing is primarily provided for school children, both on foot and on bikes. That process was to be completed as part of following the Chorus fibre network process. Speed limits. As we know, we have consultation underway at the moment, and on the 16th of November, we'll get submissions back for that consultation process. Pensioner housing to destination residents, more to do with the strategy for pensioner housing. So the intention is to have a draft available for the Economic Development Workshop on the 29th, then final review of council meeting in the November meeting. So that's progressing well. I've seen a provisional draft and have yet to make comments on it. Carnegie building project. As you recall, we failed to get lotteries support for our second application, but I am pleased to announce we have been successful with Regional Culture and Heritage application. So that application for $798,000 has been approved. So we can now go ahead with the full process of implementing that tender. So we'll initiate that and get project management underway to start that work, which is a significant milestone for that project. Fox landfill. This has been progressed well as part of our shovel-ready projects. We've already contracted Glacier Guides for the river cleanup. That work is expected to start in the next couple of weeks. And the consent applications, both for Butler's landfill and also for Fox landfill works, are underway. We expect that the Fox landfill works consent should be completed within the next 3 weeks, and hopefully work will start this side of Christmas on that. The Butler's landfill is likely to be February because it's quite a complex application for resource consent. And that will start mid next year. Iwi representation around the table. This is obviously an ongoing expectation or opportunity for council, and we're proposing to put it as agreement to LGNZ as part of next year's annual general meeting for LGNZ. And the last point relates to the first point on the action list. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillors, will take the report as received and open it for discussion. Paul.
Thank you, Worship. The Canary pedestrian crossing does surprise me that it's been judged to be still in the right place. I still would have thought that a site closer to the old shop would have been safer, away from that sweeping bend, and plus you've got greater line of sight eastwards. You've just got the traffic coming across off the Canary Bridge, of course, but that's a good way. I would have thought that it would have been a safer spot.
Can I take as a recommendation that I get District Asset staff to take you there and actually discuss it on site, if you're okay with that?
Yeah, I imagine I'm not the only one that's surprised that it's position on it. The other one was the Carnegie building, which is great news. Terrific news. So can I ask when we will discuss what is the long-term use of the Carnegie building?
So that is will be discussed as part of the long-term plan discussion process for workshops. So we have already engaged a consultant to do some conceptual work, and we'll bring that into a wider stakeholder discussion before Christmas.
Right, so consultants are working on some plans for.
We've engaged consultants to work on both Mountain J
Pakata.
and Carnegie.
Okay. Yes, okay, it's because the long-term use of the Carnegie building will be.
Yes, we'll be bringing a report to council next month as well in terms of that. There's some criteria within the funding that that is quite important that we need to bring forward to council to resolve as well.
Yes, so this will also look at the future of Drummond Hall as well.
Not for the funding for Carnegie, it doesn't.
No, not the funding, but
Yes, the second plate, yes, we'll talk about Carnegie at the same time. Drummond Hall.
Drummond Hall. So that probably all needs to be packaged together, doesn't it?
Does.
Like a white tower.
Yeah.
Drummond Hall and Carnegie.
Correct.
Discussion. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cody.
No, everything looks good there, and anything I would reiterate is well done on receiving that extra funding of $798,000. May it continue with this extra funding that we seem to be having a run-on success with lately.
I'd just like to thank Jackie Gurdon as part of that application. She took the lead on behalf of council, and without her expert knowledge in this space, she did a great job of putting the application together.
Councillor Kennedy.
No, all pretty good. The Fox landfill, that's great that that's being cleaned up. I do think we need to be proactive with our other legacy landfills and ensuring that all the rest of it moving forward. One thing I would like added to the action list, if I may, is the Hokitika wastewater treatment plant and whatever's happening around that. I know it's a big bit of document and it's probably going to be the most significant thing in Hokitika for some time. I just want to, if it's on the action list, we know where we're going at all times, not end up in 2 years where we don't have a clear plan or whatever.
Can I just make a comment? So we have a capital projects and tenders committee that looks at all of our projects, not just the one in isolation. Having that as a specific item on here, I know we'll be talking about it every month in terms of progress. More of a prompt than an action.
I suppose I just, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, I just fear it gets pushed onto the back burner and.
It's definitely not.
Yeah.
We have included the front end of the design work and consenting for that project as part of our Three Waters Reform Fund. So they're tranche one of that fund is putting some money aside to do that work. We are developing the delivery plan for that. It has to be finished before the end of this month and get signed off by DIA. So that is quite a considerable lump sum at the front end to do that work. So it is, and we have 12 months to use it. So it's not going to drop off the radar.
Yeah.
No, that's definitely on the radar.
Sweet, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Councillor Kennedy, I don't see any issue putting it on the action sheet for a discussion point. It is a significant item and someone's going to bring it up. You're just worried that it is one of the biggest things we've got.
And not so much an action thing, but just a continual to keeping the public up to date of where we're at on it, as opposed to, I'm not saying you are putting it on the back burner, obviously you're not, it just,
He's very focused on it.
Yeah.
Councillor Martin.
Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship. I wasn't at last month's meeting, unfortunately, and wasn't up to date at the time with the discussion around the Carnegie cycle trail or proposed road crossing. One of the issues I take it is around safety. The other that I think is a worthy point was the fact that the heritage area has been upgraded and is an attraction in itself, and getting pedestrians or bikes to that area. Is that correct, Paul?
Yes.
So I wonder if a happy compromise could be the extension of the footpath or track on the riverside from the hill right to the car park and the heritage area. So people have the option to continue on the cycle trail or the proposed cycle trail to the heritage area, visit the heritage area and then cross the road, as opposed to crossing the road and then having to cross back.
Right, I need to.
Oh, I know, it's a technical thing and
Yeah.
I don't need an answer now, but I wonder if that could be a way that you could achieve the outcome that I think is fair comment, Paul, around the work that's gone on there, and also takes into consideration the safety elements.
Yeah, I think a worthy trip to the site and actually working through what is the best outcome for all parties is probably the next way forward on that. So a site visit with, if you would like to be involved as well, in terms of key stakeholders.
Yeah, no, it'd be great. It'd be great to pick that up as part of the next phase. You know, there's aspirations for developing that heritage area and like sealing the car park and things. So there'll be lots of discussion that I think falls out of that. It'd be worthwhile taking all councillors that are interested in a site visit. I'd support that. Thank you so much for the update. Lots of key strategic bits of work falling into place. Thanks, Simon, and thanks, Your Worship.
No, I've got no questions, but that's awesome news about the Carnegie funding. It's great.
Just to reinforce, we had a preferred tenderer for that work, so we obviously have to go back to that tenderer. We have also looked to assign an external project manager for this because it's such a strategic piece of work and it's quite technical. So we've engaged Joseph Partners to take the lead on this. Very familiar with heritage building upgrades in Christchurch and working with us on some other components. So we've engaged them to take the project oversight for this.
Deputy Mayor Brothers.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. But just want to endorse what's been said about Carnegie. I think that really is momentous news because up until very recently, that project was looking decidedly dodgy, and it's one of our key amenity buildings in the town and district. So it's just fantastic that we're going to get that reconstructed up to 100% of IL2. It's fantastic. Simon, the status of the contract with the contractor, that's quite old now, the tender price. Do you have confidence that that will be adhered to?
So we have, like I said, contracted Tony Joseph to take a lead and do another review on that pricing. They're very, very good at reviewing that type of building and the mechanics that go behind the pricing of it. So they'll take that as a first stage and review the pricing with the contractor.
Right. Okay. Thanks. And at this stage, of course, we have no idea of an ETA or even when commencement might happen.
We've had a provisional discussion with the contractor and they are gearing up to start as soon as practical. So he is actually looking forward to getting into it.
Fantastic. That's even better news. Fantastic. Thank you.
Councillor Davison.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I was surprised about the crossing out at Canary, keeping it there. I'd like to be involved with an on-site meeting out there. There's quite a bit to be discussed there. There's the cycle trail and stall. So we've got to get that right, that crossing. Thank you.
Councillor Moon.
Yep, just looking forward to clarity, I guess, around development and usage of the Carnegie, of Drummond and Jade, because I think it's all,
Yes.
I feel like I haven't got my head around that at all now. Great that we've got the funding for Carnegie, absolutely, but just how it's all going to work. And I hope that not too many plans are put in place before it goes out for discussion in the wider.
No, so we've got a lot of concept scoping work to be done now, and obviously the full LTP consultation document. And we'll obviously bring council along with other key stakeholders on that journey with us.
Forward to that, thank you. And I think probably Fox Landfill is alpine guides, not glacier guides, possibly, because glacier guides are usually in France. Just saying.
It's a glacier guides.
It is glacier guides from Franz Joseph. Okay, sorry, thank you.
Councillor Hartsham.
Yes, no, great news. I'd just like to thank Jackie and whoever else helped to get that funding. That's fantastic. It's going to be a major attraction in the town when it's all done. Yeah. Apart from that, yeah, there's the cycleway at Carnegie's probably, I would have thought was be interesting to see what comes out of it. I thought it might have been better down the road, but obviously when you get on site, it might be a different story. So, yeah.
Thank you. Nice one.
Just one, Simon, just remind me how we do the public consultation around the speed limits.
Around what's the rest?
Speed limits.
So that is the draft bylaw, so the recommendation speed limit changes are out to the public at the moment. We've got quite a few submissions coming in.
So it's just been the submission process, it's not engagement.
No, through a consultation submission process, special consultation process.
Cool.
And we should have all those back, and extraordinary council meeting on the 16th to deal with those. Fair to say there's a lot of correspondence coming in.
Oh, no, it just got brought up this morning when I went having an event out there, the cars come past. Since it's just Paul mentioned it to me too, saying that it's good time, so I'll probably have to put one in.
Thanks, councillor. So someone like to move with a couple of small additions. One, that a site visit under the Canary School cycle trail, and a site visit be organised, and the second one is we raise as a discussion point on the action list, Whakateka Waste Water Plant. Someone like to move in that direction? Councillor Davis.
So we should also recommend that the Carnegie funding one be removed.
Yes, well done on that, Simon. And with the removal of Carnegie funding, we have mover and Councillor Davidson. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hartshorn, thank you. Those in favour?
Aye.
Good news there, Simon. Right, the next item on the agenda is item 7, and it's a presentation from Jack O'Connor, who's with us here today. He's manager of Canterbury West Coast Sports Trust, and it's about West Coast spaces and places. It's a plan update. Come on up, Jack, and thank you very much for taking the time to come along.
Thank you, Your Worship and councillors. First of all, through the chair, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to talk to the West Coast Spaces and Places, and I might keep asking for money, so you might
welcome.
Back in just a very brief history, back in 2017, Sport Canterbury and Sport New Zealand approached the mayors and chairs around about raising a spaces and places plan for facilities plan for the West Coast. It's a Sport New Zealand initiative which has been run out over the whole country, and there were 3 areas: the West Coast, Tasman, and in the Southland at the time, which were the only ones that hadn't been completed. So we took it upon ourselves, we had endorsement from the mayors and chairs to push ahead with that, and we managed to approach each council in the 2018 annual plans. There was a brief amount of funding produced from each 3 of the councils at the time, Buller, Westland and Grey. And this project has been run out over the Regional Sports Trust, which we cover Sport Tasman, cover the Buller district, and Sport Canterbury covered with grey and District Westland. So that meant that it was a combined project, and it was decided that we would share that work with Sport Canterbury taking the lead on it. This is sort of a brief outline. The brief itself was a project to develop West Coast spaces and places to identify the needs and inform future sport facilities and places and spaces and places and investment decisions. And that really comes down to trying to sort out the wants from the needs and giving a process to actually utilise that and to come out with determined. And for councils in particular, you get a lot of people asking for things, and it's hard to say no sometimes, but it's also really good to identify what we need. So from that point, we actually set out trying to discover what we actually had on the West Coast. And some of the things we found is that we've got an awful amount, a huge amount of sporting and recreation facilities, the good ones, but they are definitely ageing and not fit for purpose. And very little planning had gone into a lot of these facilities for future planning and future proofing. And this is when people knock on the door saying we need a new roof for a hall or a facility. What can you do to help us? So the project was sort of hoped to take sort of somewhere between a year and shortly after that it's taken 2 years. And that's just because we didn't know, and nobody seems to know. There's a lot of misinformation out there, who the people to go to. We drive past these halls and sports grounds and rugby paddocks and things, but trying to track down who actually is responsible for it was a really tricky situation. So it's a moment in time document. So we have come up with it as best as we could, and it will be an ongoing process, but I think we've probably got somewhere around about 85% of it correct. We've certainly missed some things. And since we've started, some things have disappeared. No longer a swimming pool at the very high school that just disappeared overnight, sort of thing. So going forward from here, the Sport New Zealand have invested in this quite heavily, and so have the funders. So the game machine funders, they want to know that any money that they're investing into facilities is valuable. We found out that there was a lot of single-purpose facilities and very little collaboration and very little usage of those facilities. One statistic is that schools are used 13% of the time. 13. That's 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So imagine what often a club rooms is used for. And we're talking less than 1% of the time. Point to something of 1%. So when we start investing into those, we need to start being thinking really strategically around how we do that. So we've gone through and we've actually prioritised some of the recommendations as we go through. And we've got very specific. There's actually 151 pages in this document, which you don't have in front of you here, because there's a lot of detail and a lot of stuff which, and trust me, when I was proofreading it, there was a lot of stuff to make it happen. Probably one of the key things is the framework plan, which is, in the past we've tended to go for a concept, look for funding, build it, and then see who wanted to use it. So here we're talking about a concept, a needs assessment, feasibility if suitable, confirm partners, a business case, and then confirm the design procurement of the building. So it sounds quite a long-winded process, but I think it's actually going to be quite a good tool to actually apply to different things. And so we're not asking, all we're asking really from it eventually is that councils will endorse this process, but there's no commitment to stand by this, because everything's taken into consideration. But it's good to have some tools at your hands that you can make some informed decisions. The challenges, as I said, it took a long time to find the people that we needed. Quite often they're run by committees, and it takes It's not as easy as asking somebody, we have to wait for a committee meeting and then they have to come back to us, and they have to approach and make decisions. And then in the meantime, they've had an AGM and those people are no longer involved, so we're back to square one again. And just that ownership. And even within councils, we found that people weren't quite sure what they were responsible for. And sometimes there were councils were actually holding, covering things that they didn't actually even own or group. They belong to a region, to a local group. There are a lot of community-based little groups that are running domains on little domain boards and committees that we weren't aware of. And they're sort of starting to accumulate who those are and what they're doing. Findings, I can tell you there's a large number of ageing facilities, often oversupplied. Rugby fields is a good example. West Coast Rugby Union were very clear that they've got way too many rugby fields. Traditionally, they used to have 13 clubs. Those fields quite often still being maintained, but they don't actually have a need for them. And there may be one team running off those sometimes. Some of them have got animals on them now. Standalone facilities we've got a lot of traditional thinking where people don't want to share. And so we've got to break down some barriers before the decisions making around those, but we do have to start somewhere. There's a very heavy reliance on school facilities, schools, and especially in our smaller communities. And quite often there's no memos of understanding in place. They're just goodwill, and if a principal changes or has a fallout of some sort with that community group, it can be a risk. COVID was a good example where all of a sudden people were not allowed to walk on school facilities, and so those grounds were no longer accessible at all. West Coast Cricket will try an indoor facility at the former Civic Centre, which John McCall High School now own. Could not access it for their whole winter, even though the indoor nets were ready to go. And that was just part of that education policy. We've got an ageing volunteer base and a diminishing volunteer base. So again, we put a lot of pressure on people and an increase in compliance on those people as well. So we have got a few risks, but it's not all bad news. Where we've got good facilities, we've got strong sports running. And I think basketball is a very good example of that. We've now got some in Buller, we've got the double court system there, we've got a double court system in Greymouth, and now we've got the DWC Sports Hub here and the hall upgrade. So we've got some really good, plus we've got Fox and Franz and Reefton, and they're working on theirs as well. So basketball's actually thriving. Hockey doing fairly well, but they've got some good facilities, 2 good turfs, which are nationally, and they are bringing people into town. When we actually start looking at the numbers for servicing those facilities, we don't actually stack up. So we do have to take the geographical nature of the West Coast into play. A swimming pool, I think it's 35,000 people requirement to service a swimming pool. Now that's which means we're struggling to do one on the whole of the West Coast. So but there's a realistic around that. We need them. We can't do that because we're the length of Carnegie to Hurst. So we do have. There's so many decisions that have to be made around that. So that's some of the findings, and this document is it's been a real enlightener. It's been a great way to actually engage with people and make sure that we are trying to find out what we want to do. Some of the key region-wide recommendations is that this carries on and that we can get some endorsement from the 3 councils, and that all we'll be asking for is some time to maintain this working party that would meet a couple of times a year to upgrade and look at it, review it, and make sure that we're on top of things. And that any future developments, and for example, the race course going ahead, you've got that land, that would be come under a consideration as a priority. And it may not be this year, but in conjunction with council, could we say that this is a 3-year, 5-year, or 10-year sort of plan, or 15-year. Swimming pools, same sort of thing. This has been shortcut a wee bit by some of the shovel-ready projects, obviously, one of the recommendations is that the community halls did need to be considered consideration, and I see some of the money has come into that already. So it's good to see that. Another recommendation is Jellyman Park and Greymouth, that no money gets spent on that until the flood system and the sea level rising sea levels are addressed. Grey Council's actually dealing with that at the moment. And it could be that they lose one of their full grounds, or that ground is given away for sport and relocated differently, rather than spending good money into a space that doesn't no longer exist. Carter's Beach is exactly the same up in Westport. Once had thriving rugby paddocks, tennis courts, now it's just basically eating away. So they're not going to spend money on that other than flood protection, ensuring that they've got that right. From here, again, like I said, we're looking for some endorsement that this is actually a project that you guys have invested in, and we've spent a lot of time actually coming together. We have had council staff and working through this with us, and that we would actually like them to actually carry on with that. And where we can, we will use the expertise that we could tap into, and it could be something around MOUs that we may not have the expertise with other schools, need to find things like that. And really, and so we just want to make this available as a tool. Funders are already looking at it around their sports facilities. And I can tell you that the draft was already available. They asked the questions around the DWC Development Hub, and we've asked that question, and we said it was already in the plan, in the draft plan. That was good enough for them, that it was actually being under consideration and moving forward. So it's good to know that we can actually use these tools. So pretty much, I won't go on too much because it is a long document, and I don't expect everyone to be aware of it, but I just had to bring them up to play with where we're at, and that where we could go.
Thanks, Jan. Councillors, you have the document on team systems. We'll take it as read and open it for discussion.
Very, very comprehensive report. Be interesting to see how this works in with the master plan for the race course in Care Square. Just underway now. So that would be interesting to see how that plays out. I see under the recommendations for Rugby League and talks about maintaining Woodland Park and possibly using John Sturgeon Park as an alternative site, which is like the Catholics going to a Protestant church. No mention though here, I've listed of Waitson Island, where the river's biting in there in this.
No, what has actually been discussed around that is that we're waiting to see the regional council in the process of doing the sea erosion reports, and so further in there, it does actually refer to that, so that we, so a lot of those things we're going to wait and see where appropriate. And so I mentioned those, the two up there, the Waitson Island will come out of that as well once the regional council comes in with the sort of response. What we were very careful of is that to not try and duplicate, we have very limited resources, so we didn't duplicate where possible. We put into national strategies and other, like there's a national cycling strategy. So we're not going to try, we're going to work in with that rather than trying to rewrite it. And yes, so Waitson Island, yes, it is a wait and see sort of process. But as far as having to go rugby league, yet they were keen to carry on with Waitson Island. What you mentioned about rugby and league, very interesting. They're actually starting to talk about that collaboration, because they realise that they can no longer afford to stand alone, and we've got facilities there that aren't being used, they'd like to use them. And it's actually nice to have them in that same room. But they are those traditional discussions we've struggled with.
We had that a few years ago. Yeah, and you're right about the returning fields around to the rugby fields. And just around, particularly, probably not enough alternative fields. We've had this before when Castree was closed and had to play at Ross and Woodstock. So while there's a surplus, there's also a deficit. There was, for instance, there used to be that rugby, not a full rugby ground, it was a training ground really, down at the end of Stafford Street. And then there's the erosion of vitamin, and they gave up on that one. And then Walker Park hasn't been as great as everyone thought it was going to be. But anyway, interesting report, thank you.
Councillor Cogan.
Yes, Jack, very comprehensive report and one I completely and utterly support and empathise with you on doing. Being heavily involved in community groups and sporting bodies over many years, I can appreciate your frustration as well around trying to find contacts and confusion around who runs what and who to be in contact with. From the aspect of being involved in these sporting groups and community groups firsthand, I know the frustration and the hard work that's involved around when you're trying to run as one identity, the costs that are involved in that and the amount of fundraising involved for single clubs just to be able to keep running. And that's unfortunately often at the expense of actually being, especially for sporting bodies, to be able to put it back into actually the players, which is the most important thing, to get them involved, whereas your focus is on, paying rates and, paying for all these other associated costs. And so I fully support there being a lot more collaboration around groups utilising single-purpose buildings together to share out those costs so that that money can actually go back to where it actually needs to, which is the community groups and the sporting bodies and what we're there for, and that's for the people that are active in them. So, yeah, be interested to see how it progresses for you actually, and fully supportive of the initiative that you guys are now doing with it.
Councillor Kennedy.
No, all good, thank you. Do you see Hokitika in the future as needing a single-use facility for everything? You think that's the way forward?
Sorry, what was that?
Oh, like whether it's the racecourse terrace being, everyone goes to the same spot for the same thing, well, multi-use facility. Do you think that's the way forward rather than all these sports fields everywhere?
Yeah, it needs to be collaborative, and because not all sports are going and everything's going to fit into one space. Gymnastics is probably a good example where they're a sport that needs to have their equipment set up every day. They can't just be in that one building and then pack it up at night and then come back in the morning and pack it up again. So they will be to a point where they need to be in sort of a purpose built, and they don't have that facility at the moment anywhere. But something like football, they don't have a home anywhere, and we sport soccer, football, we sport grey or Westland. So again, they are screaming out to be a partner with somebody, and that's the same size paddock that we're using for rugby for league, and they're not being used as often as they were. And quite often they're being used on a Sunday as opposed to a Saturday. And you start to see, like in Casswell, we've got the multi-use goalposts. And those sorts of things. And that's what we need to be using. Thinking about all of those when we invest in that set goalpost, can it be used for soccer as well? So yes, where possible, I think, and getting the people in the conversation early on when we're looking at partnerships and rather than just going to get building.
And another question to you is, do you think the likes of Franz Joseph and Haast need a sports field?
And that's where the schools have been invaluable for us, because the numbers wise, Haast probably doesn't. When you talk about the number of teams, the number of people available to use it. But if we've got a school that can actually maintain a field for us, but we need to actually discuss that with them and have a minimum of understanding so they're prepared to do that. And it could be that we look for funding to support them to keep that up to standard and make some sure it's available for it on a Saturday when we're looking to use it. So rather than creating a whole new field, I don't think we need to, but we need to make sure we've got something available for everybody.
No, definitely. Just with friends, I think it's well overdue for a proper size sports field, and it's just my opinion. But thank you very much.
Councillor Martin.
The beard of the Waiho River. Kia ora, thank you, Bruce. Thanks, Jack. That's it's really good. I mean, collaboration is something that I've been pushing in this space for a while, and it's great to see that coming through, the essence of this report. I think we've led the way in Westland, particularly in Hokitika, with the collaboration between netball, basketball, badminton, tennis, and the outdoor sports codes as well, in terms of achieving what they have with the DWC Western Sports Hub. So thanks to the role you played in that project as well, slightly outside of this, but the good thing about that facility is it's designed to be, it's able to be potentially relocated as well. So there's lots of opportunity when you look at the collaboration that exists already in terms of what the collaboration aspiration is for the future. People are talking about one venue. There's a lot of excitement there, I think, for the district. So in terms of your recommendations, are you proposing that we receive this report or adopt it, or is this to note and then there'll be a further report come back to us of the final version? Or
No, this is the final version, but it's a moment in time one which will be readdressed annually. And then a 3-year there will be a full review done every 3 years. And what we're actually doing, just basically endorsement of it, but you don't, there's no commitment to abide by it. And that's what this has been all the way through. It's a new tool that we really would like to see utilised and available. Considered.
Councillor Hunt.
No, thanks, Jack, for the report. I have no questions.
Are you playing field with cocktail?
There's a few there already that aren't used.
Deputy Mayor Carruthers.
Thanks, Your Worship, Jack. Fantastic report. But I have to say I was a bit daunted by it in the light of our recent acquisition of the Racecourse Terrace area, where we had thought about some kind of sports use, etc., for that amenity. In the light of what you've outlined in your report, I wonder if that's wise. Off the top of your head, do you have any comments about that racecourse land and its potential use?
There was one of the sort of things that came up during the process, and the fact that it was a fantastic asset to procure on behalf of the district. I think that's a fantastic idea that the council's gone ahead and done that negotiation with the racing board, or the Hokitika Race Course. And then now I think that you've got that. I think that's applying a process to that rather than just jumping in and ensuring that the long-term process, that's an asset that could be utilised to really make Westland is a huge opportunity. And to the point where, at the time when we looked at it, the swimming pool was, when we first started, the swimming pool was high priority. And then that changed so that it wasn't quite as high priority because it was recognised that Greymouth had a really good facility and that should be maintained, the Westland one. And again, funding's come available at different sources from different ways. But I would see that as an example as, should the pool be built brand new in 5, 10, 15 years' time? Would it be built at the same facility? Or would there be provision for the likes of the race course, which is near schools, near a developing residential area? Would it be an opportunity to relocate that at that point in time? But not now, but 5, 10, 15, 20 years plan. So I think the race course is a great procurement, but it's also a challenge as to how that will play out.
Okay, thank you, Jack.
Councillor Davidson.
No, good report, nothing, no questions from me.
Councillor Hart. Sorry, Councillor Neal.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. It's interesting, isn't it? I love collaboration and sharing of facilities. I'm just reading the gymnastics one, likely one facility, either maybe Greymouth or Hokitika. It's so much resistance and so difficult. It's a real barrier that travelling to the other distance. I know our local gym club have got a huge membership, fantastic. If it wasn't in Hokitika, probably about maybe 15% of those kids would still go. So it's just that trying to get all those balances in place here.
Yes, and Westport Gymnastics uses the racecourse facility, one of the tote buildings that they have down there, which, because I think they have 3 race events a year, they're happy to pack it up for those times, and it gives them free access to that facility. Greymouth, they don't have Dobson Community Hall, which if it's booked out for the 21st, they have to pack it up for the weekend and put it down again. So
We've got a tote building here. I don't know if the framework's strong enough for gymnastics weights standing off at home. It's good, thank you.
Councillor Hartwell.
Yeah, no, great report. Fully support the idea, and I can see in 10 or 15 years when the council are here, race courses up there, that's just the prime spot to me for all these sports into the future and have a great facility up there. That's just my thoughts.
Francois.
No, I did have a question around some the organisations double up in funding, but it's because it's 2 rounds. So, no, fine, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, councillors, I'm suggesting that we resolve that the presentation from Jack O'Connor, manager of Canterbury West Coast Sports Trust, be received. The issue of endorsing the process would be a later part of the process. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Kennedy, Councillor McCogan, those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Jack, thanks very much for the presentation. The report's really comprehensive. We're right behind you.
Thank you. And may I just quickly, I included this in the paperwork. It's another good news story. Sport New Zealand had a community relief fund, round 1 and 2, during COVID to support sports that were struggling and had showed loss of income over that period of time, but still had outgoings. And almost $200,000, $194,000 came to West Coast to support sports. But it also showed that a lot of sports, they struggled because there were volunteer groups trying to put applications together. But that's made a huge amount of relief. And the people that have come back to us and said, I can sleep comfortably now, that we've got our insurance paid for the year, I didn't know how we were going to do that. So that's what makes my job feel really good, and especially sometimes. So that's been fantastic, and I thank you for your time today.
Did you drive the application process?
It was a Sport New Zealand process, and it was done through the regional sports trusts across the country, and I engaged with the local communities. As you can see, there's other Westland, South Westland, Grey, and Hokitika.
Personal experience, Jack, you engaged very strongly and really encouraged lots of groups to go for it, so thank you for that.
Yes. And whilst that encouragement that needed, because that, as I said, anyone who's done funding applications, they know they'll be able to do it. So,
It's a good one.
That's what my question was today. That's quite cool.
We'll look forward to the next meeting. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is item number 8 and staff reports. The first one is the projects and carry forwards for 2020, 2021. They're on pages 8 to 14 of your agenda, and Leslie Crichton, Group Manager of Corporate Services, will present.
Take the report as read. Happy to answer any questions.
Good. Councillors, we will take the report as read and open it up for discussion. Paul.
Thank you, Worship. I'm new to this, but it just seems a little high. Is it extraordinary because of COVID?
We have projects sometimes that are multi-year projects. We have projects that are work in progress at the year end. And that's obviously, we've had some expenditure, but we're carrying over the rest of the budget to continue. We wouldn't want to abandon it at that point. And there are some other projects that we just didn't get started. And this report is to approve the carryovers of all those three. So, projects that are in progress, multi-year, or just we didn't start. It's about the same amount every year.
Oh, this was done next week.
Yeah.
How does it compare?
At the moment, we will, now we're better staffed, we hopefully will get to be able to carry out these projects better.
Councillor Coe.
Yeah, just a couple of things, Leslie. I did wonder because the list obviously does seem lengthy. And I did wonder around that, because of course I'm well aware too, COVID did have an impact everywhere on everything anyhow and put things on hold for a bit. But did some of those projects, because we've obviously got the funding there to do them, was it a case of lack of resources as well to be able to complete them? Are we lacking in that area? Or did we have over expectation of what we could actually think that we would be able to do in that time frame?
So COVID will have impacted anything that wasn't an essential project, because work obviously had to stop on anything that wasn't an essential project. But previously we've been under-resourced, we're getting better resource. But projects, we put these on the annual plans or LTP, but there's a lot of work that then has to go on. So there's planning, scoping, tendering, and sometimes that takes a little longer. It just drags out a bit longer and isn't completed at the end of the year.
So it's probably better, do you think, that we need to better do some work around, being practical about what we want to achieve in those 12-month periods, rather than having this wish list of stuff that we really want to get done, but the reality is, because we're limited with we're always going to be limited with money, but also with resources, where we need to also drop that expectation, because at the end of each financial year, obviously, I think the outcome would be that you'd want to see a much shortened list than this, but something of the tasks that have been decided to have been done to either at completion or near completion.
Yeah, so obviously that's where you would want to be, but up until recently we haven't had a lot of asset information, and that is improving, and that will better inform us for what we need to put into the LTP. Some of these projects, not these projects, but some of the current year's projects may well be rescoped into the LTP at no cost to ratepayers.
Simon, would you like to?
Yeah, just through your worship. There's a couple of things in terms of how we attack projects. I've been here 2.5 years now, and it's fair to say we haven't made a lot of progress in actually knocking over the list that we intend to do every year. And you're 100% right. We were quite ambitious with the last LTP, trying to do a lot and get this in a good state. What we didn't do is actually beef up either the resources internally or put money in the project to get external resources to do the work. So we have a higher carryover going forward. Currently, we're in a position where we're increasing district assets team to be able to execute projects a lot better, so that we have a new asset manager arriving on Monday. And that their role is primarily about delivering projects along with Louis and the other team in district assets. So resourcing up, but also including costs if we have to outsource in the next LTP.
Yeah.
So very happy with the way we're progressing into this year and progressing to knock a lot of these over. There's a lot of small stuff in there which we rely on other contractors to do on our behalf. And now being diverted as well, not only with COVID, but with civil defence issues, particularly West Roads, who were rebuilding roads and doing other significant works in terms of flood events. So we are So I'm not happy with where we ended up the year, but I'm happy with the progress we've done since then.
Yeah. No, thanks, Simon. I mean, that's just that reassurance and that, you know, once again, that expectation around, you know, moving forward, ensure that when we say we have this wish list of things, that we do have the funding and the resources there to be able to.
I suppose another aspect, when we put the OTP together, we didn't realise that there's a lot of extra funding out there. So we put our hand up for funding and those projects have come through, which then divert us away from that we have. So all of those projects have been executed, you know, we're talking toilets on this point, wastewater treatment plant, all of those opportunities we jumped on and grabbed and got funding for, which weren't primarily in our LTP. So they divert resources away as well.
Councillor Kennedy.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. One thing I don't quite understand, and forgive me, if we had have completed all of these projects at the end of this year, would they have gone against our debt?
Yeah.
So if we had and we're tracking at the same debt levels we should be against the long-term plan currently? No, behind by 3 point. Okay, sweet. No, that's that was my only question. I suppose, long story short, on this list seems to be pretty significant or critical infrastructure, and I am not happy with the length of it. Long story short, and I know it's not you, Leslie, but
no, I know. Well, I was going to say, if you look at it, you will see that there's already been expenditure. So there are already projects that are actually in progress. And, you know, when you plan a project or have a project, it's not always, you can't just say, right, I'm going to start it now and it's going to be finished by the 30th of June. It's not always possible to do that. You'll have some work in progress. Every company has work in progress. And a lot of this is just work in progress. So it's just carrying over funding.
I suppose my fear is this is a lot, like you say, it's a lot of work, and this is work from last year. What's going to happen this year with the work that we've got to do? Next year we're going to have $5 million worth of carryover and all the rest of it. I mean, just one thing I'd note here, like there's the Haast landfill that's about 5 years, or 4 or 5 years old, you know, like we probably should have done that by now, but that's just me, and yeah, I'd like to get on, and perhaps it would be great to stimulate the economy within the Western District is get on with the work that we need to. Thank you. Cheers, Leslie, for the list, by the way.
Councillor Martin.
Good, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Leslie, for the report. Option 2, you talk about projects. The schedule could be amended by adding or deleting items. What didn't make the cut from the staff's recommendation in terms of carry forward? Have you got a list of projects you're proposing not to carry forward?
So really, anything that was cut was either rescoped into the current annual plan, so it's already in there through the annual plan, or projects, very few of them to be honest, that are actually going to be required to do through the long-term plan process.
Just through your worship, I can answer it. So some of the work around when we put cameras down stormwater drains and found where the real issues were, required us to rescope in terms of priority. So some of them weren't deemed to be necessary anymore. So that's the type of thing that we would move. So and reprioritise that work as part of the last annual plan process.
So there's no project here that that isn't being carried forward effectively. Effectively, if it needed to be done, it's either been done or it's been reprogrammed, for want of a better term, rescoped and included in the adopted annual plan that we've got this year.
Yeah.
Is that correct? So there's no surprises really. We're not going to get 6 months down the track and go, oh, we didn't have money for this because we didn't carry it forward. Cool.
No, thanks, Leslie. No, I have no further questions.
Give you Beck or others.
No, all clear. Thanks, Leslie.
Councillor Davidson.
Just a couple of things, Leslie. I'm just on that Casquare Pavilion. What's the upgrade on that?
What's sorry?
It's one of the, it's the Casquare Pavilion upgrade. What is that?
I'll have to defer to the district assets.
So sorry, through the chair, the Casquare Pavilion upgrade is actually planning for the future pavilion. So that is basically doing the basic design and will form part of the consultation process when we go out for consultation from Casquare and West Coast. So some of the support information to that.
Thank you, Lloyd. And just another one on the stormwater at Beach Street realignment. Whereabouts is that one?
Street alignments where the steps go up.
Oh, thank you.
On which that bonding issue there.
Thanks, Lloyd. Cheers. Thank you.
Councillor Newman.
No, thank you.
Councillor Hartland.
No, I'm good, thank you, Your Worship.
Francois.
Thank you, Leslie.
Paul, you raised your hand before.
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to ask a question for the delays with the stormwater where you put the cameras down. Is that in relation to Hoffman Street and Livingston Street?
Yes, so Livingston Street's one of our, it is our priority area.
Yes, I was going to say that was cold comfort for those.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we were surprised with the extent of damage and the amount of issues we had with that end. So we're repurposing that. We've already got Stantec working on a solution for us to design those.
Thank you. The proposed resolution is in two parts. A, that council receives the report, and B, that council approves the carry forward to the financial year 2020-21 of funds totaling $5,418,652 for the projects and expenditure itemised in Appendix 1. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Martin, Councillor Hart, those in favour?
I would like to put the name to this one.
On to the next item, and the next item is the Hokitika and Canary Resilience Project in relation to the council contribution. It's on pages 15 to 19 of your agenda, and the Chief Executive will present the report.
Yeah, good afternoon again, Councillors and Worship. So this report is in support of a PGF or a shovel-ready application made by West Coast Regional Council, and they have been successful in securing funding for the Hokitika and Canary Resilience Project. I'll take the report as read, but the 250k request of co-funding is to support that project as on behalf of us as the major stakeholder in this zone. The other thing I would like to note too is we've selected option 2, which is an extended rating district, which we have provided you a map in Microsoft Teams to include all those properties that are connected via stormwater. We believe that this matches a total flood protection approach to Hokitika and Canary. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Simon. We'll take the report as read and open it for discussion. Paul.
Thank you, Your Worship. Firstly, the Riverworks between here and Canary Township. I totally agree with, I think it's only by the grace of God that we have to be flooded, really, in some of those areas. So I fully endorse that. On the seawall, you're probably glad, Your Worship, that I don't have a vote because I actually don't agree with extending the seawall. Personally, I think that nature should really take its course as it's done for the last 150 years of human settlement in this township, and that that sea has been ebbing and flowing as long as the sea has been here. The erosion comes and goes. Yes, we're in a period of and it must be unnerving. I realise that for those backing onto the sea. However, that sea has come and gone worse, far worse than what we're seeing now. And I don't think it's time to push the panic button. Myself, I don't believe in interfering in the natural process, and I don't see the need to extend the rock wall. I think the rock wall extending right along the beachfront is not the answer. In 1914, when the town was under serious threat and the sea came right into the back of a building that's been Preston, not Preston's, used to be Preston's, Posty Plus building is now wiped out half the back of that building. That was a crisis. But of course, that was in 1914. That wasn't anything to climate change, and the sea retreated, and it's been coming and going all these years since. As I say, it's as unnerving for those that live there, I'm sure, but others that have been there longer have seen it come and seen it go. I realise that it's an opportunity with funding that won't come again. I understand that my personal view is that I think it's unnecessary.
Thank you. Councillor Coe.
Yes. So there's a few things. The first thing that I just want to reinforce from my perspective on this is that don't want to do anything, obviously, to jeopardise the funding that government have offered to give us for this project. There's just a couple of things that I would like to raise, however. One of them is a little bit similar to Paul Medgwick, is the fact that, and I totally agree, the Canary Stretch, the Hokitika River Canary Stretch, I totally support that. Lived out there for a lot of years myself and understand the necessity for that. The difference between what Paul said and what I've said, however, is that along the seafront, I'm still not completely sure that the extent of the work that's been suggested along there needs to be done. However, I also don't agree with nothing being done. And I do wonder through, as the process proceeds, whether I wondered whether there is going to be more communication with some of the locals around some alternative options around putting the money into along the seafront, but not as actually, because we haven't seen an actual plan from the West Coast Regional Council yet to know exactly what that is and whether that's set in concrete as this is where the money's going to go and this is exactly what we are putting in place, or there's some flexibility around.
So the West Coast Regional Council are meeting today to hear submissions from the parties.
Right.
So there's, I think, over 300 submissions at that area. Not all today, but obviously those that wish to be heard will be talking today. So that's a forum to query, I suppose, design, because they're taking the lead on design.
Okay. Okay. Yep. So the other question, and it has been raised, and I think it's something that perhaps we need to further investigate as a council, is around the stated 3.2 million. In actual fact, if that figure is correct, because it has, we have been told that the figure is actually, the actual figure is considerably less than that at 1.266 million. So, and why I raise that is because my thoughts around this whole process from our perspective, not from regional councils, will be around the ratepayers and the impact that comes back on our ratepayers here and how that's distributed. Sorry, and that brings me to the next question around exactly, when we approve this funding, the significance of what that funding, what what that allocation will look like for the ratepayer. I know that it talked about a figure around $54 per 100,000 in capital per house, per ratepayer. You know, for someone that's sitting around a $350,000 house, you know, that's about $175 a year, or $200 a year. Obviously, someone that's got a capital value house a lot higher, that's going to be significantly higher. You know, a question around whether, you know, we're spreading, and I know that there's different views on this around, you know, because at the end of the day, we live in a community where, regardless of if you live on Rebel Street or if you live out at Lake Canary, you know, we all utilise the CBD area and a lot of the beachfront area. So I think that the cost should be spread. Maybe it's layered in different amounts, but it still should be spread. And where it's suggested that the 250,000K comes into it, I wanted to know, is that also because we pay the 250K as our portion, but does that also then fall back on the ratepayer as well, so that then they're picking up the cost of the 250,000 plus, you know, that, and I'm sure, Leslie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, around that figure of, you know, does it work out at, is that figure around $54 per 100,000? For a household, yeah. So what is the actual impact back on the ratepayer?
So the information I've supplied today is a direct copy on the consultation document that Regional Council have gone out with.
Yeah.
So I haven't analysed their numbers, but at the 250K that there will be obviously repaying that back as it's a loan fund. So there will be a minor impact on ratepayers for that.
So what is that minor impact?
In terms of cost,
yeah.
I haven't calculated that out.
And what is the impact on the, is it the $54 per 100K per?
Is that not the regional council?
That's the regional council, right?
It's not ours.
Nothing to do with.
I thought we had to pay all on top of that 250,000. Wasn't it the way? Sorry, well then, sorry, because I've misinterpreted
we are
that.
always contributing here as a stakeholder, supporting them with $250 contribution, $250,000 contribution.
Okay, from the ratepayer. So that has nothing to do with our argument here around an extra $54 per 100,000. That's the regional council. Okay,
which has gone out to consultation.
Okay, that's my misinterpretation. Sorry around that. But yeah, and okay, so the clarity is around the 250K. But I would suggest, you know, before we look at, you know, that council maybe look into those figures from, because there's quite a bit of, well, there's a significant difference of about 2 million.
I think you have to keep in mind that the regional council process is completely different to ours.
Yeah.
And we're being asked to co-fund 250,000. That's the question in front of us here today. And that will result in about $6 million worth of work.
Yeah. Yeah, I just, from my perspective, I'm just really conscious of what and how this falls back on the ratepayer. But I am also concerned around the level of work that the regional council have said that needs to be done along the beachfront, and whether further discussion around exactly what that looks like needs to be taken a bit further.
In terms of the work that impacts the district council, our engineering team will be working alongside them, because obviously there's stormwater management, all those sort of things that we take into account, both for the Canary, Hakataka River piece, plus also along the beachfront. So that's how we can go and put into the design factor.
Can I interrupt and ask a question, Simon? Simon, will the rock wall require a resource consent from our council?
I'll defer to Fiona on that question.
Yes, it will. Yeah, they generally undertake the work as emergency works. There's still some outstanding consents for beachfront and Sunset Point, so hopefully they bundle them.
So you would, I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that. Fiona, are you saying that this is would be categorised as an emergency work, and therefore the normal processes around a resource consent wouldn't be required?
They would still require to do a resource consent, but they may do the work and retrospectively apply. I need to have a talk with them about what their plans are because they haven't approached us at this stage.
Is your view that that's appropriate, that this be classed as an emergency work? Because in my view, it clearly is not an emergency situation, and I'm just concerned we're going to end up with another Havel Wall kind of fiasco, that the council has jumped the gun in terms of the planning requirements and done work which it retrospectively permits.
The regional council, yes.
So the regional council will be, they follow their own internal processes. We don't dictate in terms of how that is managed.
But they do need to apply.
But they do need to apply for a consent, definitely.
So they haven't applied for a consent, is that?
Not yet. They haven't got a funding approval signed off yet. So this is the process for them to go to the next stage.
But so just so we're clear on that, are you saying that they can still do it retrospectively? In other words, do the work and then retrospectively legalise it?
If they do it under emergency works through the RMA, they can do it as emergency works. If they consider it emergency, it comes down to their classification.
What do we consider it as?
We don't have an opinion on it.
Well, at this stage, we haven't considered it because we've had no conversations with them at this stage. They haven't approached us about what their intention is, so we haven't assessed that yet.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, this funding's part of the shovel-ready stuff, isn't it?
Correct.
So I'm assuming that's why they're going through this process. I'm assuming they're going to get this work done because that's what the money's come through, shovel-ready, and then retrospectively go back for a consent.
So we haven't been involved with what their process actually is. So they're working internally as part of their internal processes as the custodians of looking after riverways and seawalls. So those are subject matter experts in this space, but we will require consent as part of that process as a stakeholder.
Councillor Martin. Councillor King, your turn.
Oh, thank you very much. One question, this $250,000, is that going to be loan funded through a targeted rate or the general rate?
It will be targeted on the stormwater rate, which is generally general.
So it will be the area that the map is, so it will be rated twice, yeah. It's a tough one. I think this is it's a regional council issue. I know we've got to do this co-funding, and this is a classic example of why we should have a unitary authority, and you may all laugh at me, but I'll continue to push the boat as often as I can. Yeah, that's right. What does annoy me considerably is the fact that this consultation document gone out here and in France saying that the district council has committed $250,000 to this project, but here we are after the consultation is closed talking about approving it. It really annoys me.
So the consultation document said, do you support co-funding the way it was co-funded? Especially the way we've actually submitted based on the resolution of council. So whatever resolved today is either supporting or not. It's up to your councillors.
No, sorry, the consultation document went out to the people, says that the district council has already approved it, but we clearly haven't.
So I think in fairness, I went to both the Hokianga meeting and the Friends one. They were very clear that if the co-funding didn't arrive, the project wouldn't proceed. So they weren't, I don't think they were saying that anyone had confirmed, because there's a whole...
just to reinforce what the Worship was saying, we never committed to that fund until council had resolved to commit funding.
Right. And just in terms of seawalls, and we have a family batch in Punakaiki, and there was a big journey there. I'm not an expert in whether it happened because there's a seawall or not, but slowly more rock went in, and all of a sudden the sea just kept chewing further down the beach. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if the seawall goes into Richards Drive, next thing it's going to need to go out to the sewerage ponds, more than likely. I'm not Nostradamus, but that's what I think is going to happen. Yeah, that's about it from me. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Nostradamus Kennedy. That was insightful. I've raised a few things with His Worship regarding, and it's a shame, we're not sitting at the Regional Council, but their rating model to me is flawed. And we're proposing, I support the proposed rating model that we have, but I think they're going to come unstuck because they haven't consulted with any of those people. And they're going to play this game of, we'll apply this one for this year, and we might try and change it in the future. And that's certainly what we would do. I mean, I'd be shouted down if I proposed putting a rate on someone that we haven't consulted with because it doesn't comply with the LGA. That's what we'd be told. So I don't know what advice they're getting. Where did that map come from?
The original one?
The second one.
That was worked with Regional Council and our engineering staff.
And have they made a decision today yet?
So they're meeting at 2 o'clock, I understand.
Oh, okay.
So just to reinforce, I actually would have preferred that we had Regional Council presenting, talking to Council today, but we didn't realise that they were also, their timing, that's at this time, same time as ours.
Yeah, no, that's a fate, possibly. So the $250,000, there was talk earlier, and I mean, I'm in the affected zone, so full disclosure, I received their consultation and went to the meeting. I participated as was my right, but here at our table, that 250,000, we talked about it. I can't remember if it was a workshop or discussion around the stormwater issues. The fact that the stormwater is not getting over the river protection, and the discussion was that within the project there's allowance for stormwater works. Is that like going to be a definite, or is that a
we
silver streak?
stipulated that as part of our engineering discussion with them that they had to resolve any stormwater constraints that they put on us by their works.
Because
so that's part of the future scope work.
The stormwater at Canary Township has got considerably worse following the recent work to the wall. It's documented. You've got lots of service requests about that matter from some individuals. So supporting that is, I think I'd like to see their numbers, but I think a majority of the residents out there that were consulted support the flood protection work up the river. And certainly personally, I support it. I don't support this rating zone that they're proposing. I think it's all out of kilter because effectively they're harmonising a rate across people. And if we, which is actually in contrast to what they're doing currently for the seawall, where they identified zones, which is what I think makes sense. Closer you are to it, the higher you pay the differential. The further you're away from it, you pay some, but not the same differential if it's protecting your private property. And that's the bit that I don't think's got through to them. And they've got this proposed, we got that secondary map, but the rates, I don't think they'll get away with it. I think someone will challenge that and they will not be able to strike that rate because they haven't consulted with people up Seaview and people out on the other side of Canary Road. Although I support that model, I think they'll come unstuck. So in terms of our money, I would support giving that money with that condition that they have to amend the rating structure to include that view of collective responsibility, but with a differential system that recognise the closer you are to the works, the more that your personal property benefits from said works, the more you pay. That's for them to decide, but I think our power is in actually saying this is something we strongly, I'm lobbying councils now, we strongly support, not a harmonised rate, we support a differential rate with zones or geographic areas, whatever they propose, that recognises that. I'm not a climate change expert and a sea erosion specialist. I don't know enough detail around what's proposed, but what I do think we have the mechanism to do is our Seawall Committee. I mean, it seems like it's dead.
Yeah.
What's happening with that? Because, you know, we set it up right. What's their recommendation on the proposed works?
We have I think in reality, we have a proposal from Regional Council. They've been successful in obtaining, as they have in France, a large amount of funding. Do we co-fund it? We can advocate for them to change rating areas or whatever, but at the end of the day, Regional can go anywhere else if they wanted to. There's only we're talking about $50,000 out of $6 million. So I think we've got to try and focus on what the issue is, and the issue is: do we put in $250,000 to co-fund in a very minor way?
I can see that it's black and white, and there's also some grey. Like, to me, the grey bit is around our role, and you know, the consultation document asks, what sort of governance structure do you want? Have we got it right? We've got the mayor proposed to go on it and 2 councillors. Seems really good, but does the Seawall Committee do anything? Yeah, I don't know. We've got councillors on it. It's not a discussion for now, but that's to me, that's the place to have the discussion that Paul has started to have, and you know, that's the place for those questions. It's like they can work through the detail of what's actually got proposed. We can't. We're the district council, but we have a joint Seawall Committee governance structure that exists that can do that, you know, do that detail that's required, because it's all very high level. You can see that, yep, money's been granted. There's a momentum to fund. No one wants to lose the money, but the implementation of the project needs to have that Seawall Committee established. Or no, they've not. I don't think it's actually called the Seawall Committee, but I hope you know what I mean by the Seawall Committee.
Yeah, it's called that.
Yeah, so that exists, and they can go through the process of determining with the regional council engineers or specialists or representative groups what's actually needed, you know, in terms of when they come to detailed design. So just to summarise, I support that allocation with the condition. I mean, I'd go as far as to make it a condition around the rating district and fixing that. I don't know what they'll decide today, but that would be my perspective, and get that Seawall Committee revved up and doing what it has to do under the Act.
I would expect that the Seawall Committee would morph into this new joint committee. This is how I see it pan out.
We do have some, I believe there's some time constraints. You know, I'm not sure, was it 2 months?
2 months from signing contract.
2 months, and
No.
if we can't put it together, we can't put it together.
I think we'll get it. I think we'll get it together. Like, I think everyone's acting with the same intentions. No one's got disingenuous intentions here of trying to, you know, unhinge a project or cause unnecessary angst. I just don't think our role as the district council was determine what we've clarified is actually a regional council role. That can be done through that committee, and that can be done in the next couple of weeks, surely. You know, it doesn't have to wait for many, many months. There's some competent people that sit on it from us. I think it's Jane, Tanker, David, are you all on it? And your worship, you know, an extraordinary meeting of that to get into the detail of what we've been discussing, to me, just makes so much sense.
Yeah, I can see that being, well, look, let's continue to discuss it.
Cool.
I mean, we have time constraints. We have, at the end of the day, regional council has its own obligations, and they've raised the funding, they've put the plan together, and you know, I'm sure we can advocate through the committee or whatever, but we'll have to be mindful of the constraints that they've got in relation to the funding. Same with France. We have an incredible offer in front of us. Councillor Hart.
No, I have had similar concerns to my fellow councillors, but agree that, you know, this funding is amazing, so we need to take it. But I just also wonder on the 250, were we aware of that when they put the CIP funding application in?
So they approached council in terms of this is the expectation of co-funding as a proportion, and we didn't challenge that. So it's, we thought in terms of the total scope of the application, it's a small proportion compared to the total volume of funding.
Okay, you know.
Deputy Mayor Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I think I share some of the concerns already expressed, and so don't want to necessarily regurgitate or repeat those. My concern is that we may be being seduced by the large amount of money that's on offer here, and as a consequence, and because of the necessity for speed, short-circuiting appropriate planning and so on. And I'm just dead worried that we're going to end up here, particularly in relation to the seawall, a potentially unsatisfactory and ill thought through outcome. Personally, I'm totally in favour of the Canary protection works. They make complete sense, but it's a problem to me that the seawall and the Canary works are bundled up as one commitment, one job effectively, and that we can't separate them out because they really are quite separate, obviously with separate considerations applying to them and separate planning issues around them. So, I mean, the money is seductive, I totally get that, but we've got to bear in mind that our greatest amenity, and one of the greatest amenities, is the beach in Hokitika. And when we put hundreds of tons of rock along it, which operate as a barrier to the sea, but also as a barrier from people getting to the beach, and I think that's what's happening. That's what's happened with the big rock wall out in front of the CBD. It's a barrier to people using that amenity. We need to be thinking through and planning, I think, very carefully about this. And I'm inclined to agree with Paul Madgewick's comments that there's been ebb and flow here for us forever on this beach. And we still have the beach, and we still have the foreshore, and we still have the houses there. And so I'm dubious about what's proposed. I'm worried about it. Hence my comment about appropriate resource consents and so on. And I'm worried that if this gets designated as an emergency work, which it clearly is not, that we're just going to end up in similar difficulties as we experienced with the Havel wall. So look, the money is seductive, and I don't want to bite the hand that feeds us. I totally get that, but by the same token, once we put a seawall in, that's going to affect our town and its amenities for 100 years. So we need to think extremely carefully about what we do. And my fear is we're knee-jerking our response because of this whole shovel-ready thing. We've got to act immediately and so on. And that's not the way major projects work. Major projects require a lot of planning, and that has not happened here. And that's a real worry to me. Thanks, Your Worship.
Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Deputy Mayor is worried, and I'm really worried too. I'm worried that we don't protect those houses along there. I live very close to the beach, and I've got a neighbour that lives right on the beach, and he's happy that seawall is built there. You know, that angry sea has hit that wall for the last 2 or 3 years, and he can sleep well at night. I look at places where the sea has come in and taken their homes further north, further south. You talk to them whether you should protect their homes without like a seawall there. some people might say, you don't need to do it now. You know, if the erosion is not an issue just yet, why are people making changes for climate change now? Why do people take pills for heart attacks? Why do people take pills for strokes? I definitely believe that we should put the $250 to 250,000 towards it. And I definitely believe that we shouldn't wait. We should act now. I've seen that sea take acres just recently of ground out. It's a threat. We ought to protect those houses just like this wall has protected our town in the last 5 years. A good wall. And you've still got access down there to the beach. We should act now. Thank you.
Councillor Neal.
Thank you, David. I agree with your sentiments and some of the others expressed earlier. Don't agree with you, sorry, Peter.
That's okay, Jane.
It should have come to the Seawall Committee. Got lots of questions. 7 million or 5 million. It has the CFO of the Regional Council has been quoted as saying just over 5 million. So I'm not quite sure where those details are being mixed, and I don't think we've had enough information. I'd like to have seen the application, the whole application beforehand. I'd like to know the proportions of Seawall and Canary River or Takatika River. Resource consents, Fiona, thank you for talking about that before. The entire Seawall isn't covered, they still haven't got the resource consents. I find that pretty bad, that those ones that were done, emergency works, still haven't been gone through.
To that?
Please do.
So they have got the regional rules ones around the earthworks and around the working in the coastal marine area. So they do have some resource consents. They don't have our resource consents for the land use. So they've gone through their own. So just sort of be clear, they do have some resource consents. They just haven't finalised with us. Thank you for clarifying.
I still think it's pretty bad that they haven't finalised with us in that case. And I'd be absolutely adamant that the new works should be consented prior to the work being started. I'm against retrospective consents unless it really is an emergency. I still challenge whether the last lot was an emergency. There's no talk of iwi input or consultation. I don't know if that's happened or not. Be really interested to know. And from the iwi perspective, Paul, is this a good way to go on that? Not happy with the design of the work that's been done so far, and we've had coastal experts talk to this, and the policy statements, national policy statements for coastal, it's where hard protection structures are considered necessary, ensure that the form and location of any structures are designed to minimise adverse effects on the natural environment. Hard protection structures, which is what we're talking about, where considered necessary to protect private assets, should not be located on public land if there's no significant public or environmental benefit in doing so. So actually, they're talking about having the rock protection further back, more inland. And then there's a buffer zone, and it's going to go down deeper, it's going to be more in line with what's needed when the sea, if and when the sea does come in. So I don't think that the Regional Council look at best practice as designing seawalls. It's quite different to river, and until I know that that's going to happen, I'm not happy with us being a part of it, actually. Latham, I agree with you about the rating should be in different stages depending on where you live at the, in relation to the protection that you're being offered. So at this point, I'm not for it. And like you've said, David, I don't think we should be having the pressure put on. If we don't say yes now, we might lose the money. I don't think that's the right way to go.
Councillor Hatcher.
Yeah, it's a hot topic, isn't it? there's a few issues, but on the other side, just the rating, the 250, yeah, people are, it's a targeted rate, but I think to put it on the people nearest the sea, the highest, is pretty hard on them. I think it should be spread. Personally, that's me. We all benefit from the town. Once the first house goes, the second house goes, they all go. And for my part of my life, I spent a lot of time in Wellington doing rock walls and rivers and seas. And you can design walls user-friendly. I've built many a wall, but a rock wall that actually has rock steps going down with big wide areas, so that can be achieved. I don't know whether the regional council is thinking of designing stuff like that. I haven't seen a job done on the West Coast, how they do them in Wellington or around. They're much more sort of designed, seem to last a lot longer, just by the way they're built. It could be the sea, but there's different factors in there. I personally, I'm sorry to say, but I'm going to be an odd one out like Tinker. I'm for it. If you look at history and when you look at Franz Joseph, if you don't build the wall now, it only takes one big storm, and you'll be in the middle of the night, and you'll have emergency works the next week, and you'll have no control at all. There'll be rock getting carted in, it'll be just getting happen. There'll be no design, it'll be straight off the cuff. So I think you can build a rock wall there, it can add to the town. If you went, and I said to somebody earlier on today, go down and ask anyone down behind the rock wall now, beachfront or wherever, do they want the rock wall taken out? I would say not. It's a long-term project, and I think it just needs to be done, but it needs to be done right. And I'd be very interested to see the drawings. Just when I went to Wellington a month ago, drove off the end of the airport, and there was the firm that I used to work for, and they were putting all the rock around the airport. So that is experience that, I hate to say it, it's experience you don't seem to see. But I'm for it.
Right.
You know, I'll listen to you, Paul, on this one, obviously. But more importantly, is this rating district obviously a regional council decisions? So I reckon I know some regional councils. Oh, sorry, it's a bit smart. I can't understand why it's not across Canary Road.
Doesn't make sense.
I just don't get that.
Hence the reason we came up with an alternative option after discussing with Deborah and consultation.
Right. Well, it's clear that there are a range of views. One thing's for real, we have to go back to regional council today and say, yes, we'll put on the 250,000, or no, we won't. Seems pretty straightforward.
Is it really a yes or no? I mean, is there a way to say, look, you'll have the $250,000 from the Westland District Council if the resource consents, conditions are met and it's all tidy in a way which we feel it needs to be? I don't know, because there's no resource consent for the seawall currently, I mean, surely that should be part of it. Or have you issued them with an abatement notice for not having a resource consent?
Unfortunately, there is a there is a tool within the RMA that does allow for emergency works, and because it was actively being eroded at the time, it was really hard to determine that it wasn't emergency works. However, there is an onus on them to get an application in within a reasonable timeframe, so.
Which they haven't.
Yeah, we got to.
It'd be a nice change of pace to send them a nasty letter, wouldn't it? Sorry, I'm just wondering, yeah, whether there's a way to do it, because for the regional council to get this started, they don't need the $250,000 from us to get moving. They can wait for that. I mean, honestly, I don't think it should have even come to the district council. I mean, the regional council should have been in charge of the whole thing from the start. Here we are, we know as district councillors, we know very little about it compared to the regional councillors. Yeah, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I'm trying to find a medium ground.
So Brian, I like the idea of the resource consent being required, and also I'd like to see it publicly notified and independent commissioner sitting on it. So if we can, yes, Fiona.
Yeah, but they will, they're going to get a resource consent. They're going to get it. So I don't understand.
Fiona.
It's only a restricted discretionary activity, so we can't publicly notify it, and there's only certain matters of discretion that we've got to consider, which is around the functionality, the impact on the coastal environment. So it is those environmental factors and how useful it is for our public. So we are quite limited as to what we can do to them.
So the regional council can't publicly notify it?
They can publicly notify their own, yes, but we can't publicly notify their application to us.
No, but we could make it that, we could request them to do that, or make it a condition of our contribution.
I think we've got to stick to, look, at the moment, we've got emergency works being carried out down in the area we're talking about. I'm assuming that councils are thinking about the residents along Rebel Street through into, and I'm assuming that consideration comes into account and how the erosion of their properties and the danger it creates for them is being considered. And I think it's relatively simple. The issues of the regional council are their issues, they're not ours. We're being asked to co-fund $250,000, and so I believe the easiest way is to put a resolution forward, vote on it. If the answer is no, the answer is no. If the answer is yes, the answer is yes. I mean, we are accountable to our ratepayers.
But Your Worship, why can we not impose a condition on the approval of 250,000? I don't see why we can't do that.
If their funding if the funding from government is reliant on the co-funding from the various parties, and we are in a conditional state, well, we're conditional, we're not, you know.
But the funding from government surely is predicated on the assumption that there will be a proper planning process that goes on. Simply because the government's putting money up, that doesn't mean to say that government will be happy for there to be no proper planning applications. Surely.
But that's an issue for regional council. If they don't do it properly, then someone will have an inquiry into their processes or something similar.
Well, it's not an issue for regional council, Your Worship, because the rock wall is in our district along our most significant amenity. It's our issue. Yes, I agree what you say about the planning issues, but the implications fall on us directly.
Yeah, can I just say, David, I think the issue we got here is the fact that the government's come out throwing money at us. We've all jumped at it to take it, saying we're shovel ready and we're not.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to let the opportunity go. So this is where we are. So I think we've got to consider we need a process here, but this money's been thrown at us to use it or not. And we've told them we're shovel ready. Well, we haven't. Obviously the regional council has. Clearly not. But are we going to turn it all upside down on a process that we're probably going to come out at the end agreeing to do? So I don't know what we're debating.
Unfortunately, the same objective.
Well, I've already stated my position that it's support the money on those conditions. My big one's around the rating area being clarified, and maybe that has to be clarified with the Seawall Committee. I mean, I've expressed my view, Latham Martin's view, but it's not a collective view. I'm lobbying councillors to, grant the money, put some conditions around the rates, because Simon's recommendation is the one I agree to, but they might dump it. They might chuck it in the bin. And the people on the other side of Canary Road, that does not make sense that they don't contribute to Canary's stormwater infrastructure. It just doesn't, it's not how we would apply any of our rating policy principles. So if they can tick to the change zone.
So let's look at a resolution that is set out here with the condition that the rating district that has been amended and forwarded by our council to regional council is adopted by a regional council. Is that something you can support?
Yeah, I can. And this whole, I don't want another, I mean, David's talked about Franz Joseph and stuff, which we come to next, but I mean, it was only a few months ago, Simon, we were going through procurement reviews and all sorts of crazy stuff, which this is regional council, this is our decision, and they can get a resource consent. I mean, let's be honest. If they go through the hoops, they'll get it. Go through the proper process of getting a resource consent, they'll get it. I don't think it's going to...
Only if what they're planning to do meets the requirements.
That's right.
And that's my concern.
Yeah, as a planning authority, as a regulatory authority that we are, and we grant consents, if they meet those conditions, let me clarify my point. If they meet the conditions imposed by us, they will get their consent, right? So the resource consent is their responsibility to apply for, not to come to us and say, we Mickey Mouse back to front again. We just, so sort the rate stuff out and just follow the law. Tick, tick. For them, that's what they need to do. We can't sit here and say, we're negligent to them having to get a resource consent, because they're going to have to get one. And they shouldn't have to take 5 years to get it. We'd be hauled over the coal. We would have had abatement notices from them. We would have been slam. And we're being a partner here. We're working together. So they should come, the RIP or the request for funding would have had, we did the airport one, it requires a resource consent. The government will go, yep, needs a resource consent. You apply for it. It's starting the wheels are moving, things are going, processes are being applied. They're not going to say you can't have ignore consenting. They won't allow us to ignore consenting.
Through your worship, it's really unfortunate regional council aren't here today to alleviate good councillors' concerns, because I think you'll find that they are ticking all those right boxes. We don't know the current situation in that space.
And who
it was only a couple of months ago, walked up Rebel Street there, and an elderly lady come out. She's been living there all her life, and she was worried as one thing, the ocean coming in on her property, and she was in tears. It's a terrible thing.
I absolutely support the protection of private property. Absolutely.
We need to protect those people.
Those people need that's. I don't think anyone's arguing against that either, Tanker. I don't think we. I certainly are. Let's protect the people's property, and let's do that. But the other thing is, whose land is that?
That's the land of Ron front.
Well, I mean the schematic of the line.
Most of that would be on council road reserve, I expect.
So this is where I'm from my that funny course that I got sent on to become an RMA commissioner, but we would be an affected party. So, so we're actually in partnership, whether we like it or not, because we are an affected party. And if we object to it, council passed the resolution to object to it, the consent wouldn't be granted. They couldn't proceed with the work, even if it was an emergency, because it's our land. So I think we actually have all the trump cards, and I think they will work with us if we make make conditions.
They have worked.
Yeah,
They
that's
have
right.
worked with us fully, and they've been really good with.
Yeah.
I wonder if I can not shortcut it because it's been a long discussion. Why don't we test the table, and I'm going to move that A, council receives the report. B, council approves an unbudgeted expenditure of 250,000 plus GST towards the Hokitika and the Canary flood protection infrastructure enhancements. C, Westland District Council includes in its submission a proposal to increasing the rating district to bring in other areas that benefit from the protection infrastructure enhancement work. And D, that our support is subject to our proposal to increase the rating district as per the Chief Executive's plan that's been submitted.
Bruce, can you clarify about the submission that we include in our submission?
So I can clarify that, Your Worship. So as part of the consultation process, obviously they were requesting submissions on the proposals. So we have a number of private properties that are affected. So we have put submissions in on the basis of the outcome of today. So in terms of support for the proposal, as long as it is passed by resolution of council with these conditions.
So you want to add that into the submission, or it's already?
Yeah.
So that's in there now.
So I'm moving that. I'm asking if there's someone who will second the resolution. So we can test it the way we carry on. Seconded by Councillor Davis. I realise it's a close one, but if you support the recommendation, please raise your hands.
Can we just clarify what it actually is, Bruce? Your Worship, just that in terms of getting it up on the screen, or do we know what?
Yeah.
That's, those last two ones, because the submissions have closed. But hearing them now, so how are we putting in a submission? I can't work it out.
We have
submitted based on basically on this, with support from council resolving to pass it today. If we don't pass it today, they'd basically be against the submission, against the funding.
we have a mover, we have a seconder. We have had a show of hands. Do you want to have another show of hands as to whether you support the which part are you?
Can we just clarify that wording? Because I think we can get that sorted in one clean, C and, was it C and D that were, C said something and then D said support C or something.
C and D.
Okay, so C is that Westland District Council includes in its submission a proposal to increasing the rating district to bring in other areas that benefit from the protection infrastructure enhancement work. And D, the funding is subject to this submission being accepted.
I can clarify that. I would absolutely support that. It's subject to that rating being accepted and then complying with council's due process, consenting process. Tick, 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 vote for it. Please record my vote for it if if it's amended to include resource consenting process.
Okay, so let's just start again because we've got further to do. It's been moved by myself, it's been seconded by Councillor Davidson. We've clarified C and D. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Okay, so we have.
What is D? Did D include the consenting stuff?
No, the consenting issue is a regional council issue. We can't. They've got to comply with the law. We can't go and say you've got to comply with the law. They've got to comply with the law.
Well, we can say that subject to resource consent's been obtained before the work is done.
I don't think that's fair.
Well, can we not?
Can you
explain it?
I can't.
Can we not ask them to, the cash is there unless, if we don't want them to carry it out under emergency works, that's the kind of guts of it, isn't it?
We can't do that.
Why not?
Just to clarify, the funding can be made available following a successful resource consent outcome. So we won't pay it over until that resource consent has been completed.
That sounds great.
So we'll obviously fund it, they can carry on with the government money. Ours won't be paid until the consent has been completed.
Then we need to, if there's.
I'll move that as an amendment, Your Worship.
So we have an amendment to the motion. So would you anticipate there being an E?
Yeah. Included as an E. Must be the world's longest resolution. Sorry about this, team.
Okay. I'd like to move that A, council receive the report. Councillor Martin has moved an amendment that A, council receive the report. B, council approves an unbudgeted expenditure of 250,000 plus GST towards the Hokitika and Canary flood protection infrastructure enhancements. C, Western District Council includes in its submission a proposal to increasing the rating district to bring in other areas that benefit from the protection infrastructure enhancement work. D, funding is subject to the recommendation of council in relation to the rating district being expanded. And E, that council's funding will be withheld until the resource consent is obtained.
Just with the rating district being extended, but not different differentiations being put in place. So it'll all still be the same amount for everyone in that area, is that right? That's what you're proposing?
Yes, the proposal, the amended plan that we have. So we have.
So it's extending, but it's not differentiating.
So we have to be careful, we can't dictate to regional council how they operate their rates. So we have to, otherwise they'll do the same for us.
Well, we have an amendment.
Yep.
Where there's a move. Do I have a seconder to the amendment?
I second it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Carruthers. Right, so we'll hear firstly the amendment, and if that fails, we'll go back to the original resolution. So all those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the Franz Joseph.
We haven't. No, the amendment.
Yeah, that's captured everything, didn't it?
Yep. The next item on the agenda is the Franz Joseph Flood Protection Infrastructure Enhancement. It's on pages 20 to 25 of your agenda. And Simon,
Thank you, Your Worship. Along at the same time as they applied for funding for Hokitika and Canary, they applied for funding for Franz Joseph flood protection work. They have been successful in achieving $18 million of shovel-ready funding. The total infrastructure works is at the value of $24 million, hence the reason they're requiring additional co-funding to fund the shortfall. NZTA has been proposed to promote $3.6 million towards this, and they are requesting once again a contribution from Western District Council of $250,000. I just want to highlight that all the significant previous reports around the management of the Waihao River have all included a defend composition to that process. Whilst there's a short, medium, long-term solution, this is definitely a short-term solution until we resolve long-term solutions. So I just want to reinforce that. And open up for any questions.
Sorry, if I may, very specific to this matter of a perceived conflict of interest in relation to my employment, which, depending on which way it goes, could be realised. So it's unavoidable in small communities, but I don't think it appropriate I'll be involved in the discussion or vote in relation to this matter.
Thanks, Councillor Kemp. We'll open it for discussion. Paul.
Thank you. In my view, this is a completely different scenario to the Hokitika Seawall, which in my view wasn't necessary. The Franz one was 100% necessary. and fully support. This is the funding support here is too good to, we'll never see the likes of this again. It's too good to not do it for the sake of $250,000. But will safeguard friends until we have a master plan that decides the future of migrating to the northwards slightly and slowly. 100%.
Councillor Kogan.
I 100% support the funding, absolutely, for the Friends area. I just wanted some clarity again, I'm sorry, around just that understanding around the actual rating impact on people down south. The $64 per 100,000, that's the regional council.
Correct. Yes.
Right.
Sorry if I wasn't clear on that.
Right. So the contribution from the Westland District Council for the run down south is around the 250,000. Now, also, is that spread out over, because I know reading through this document, there was a talk of joining the two rating, there must be
That's
two.
the regional council.
That's the regional council. So from our perspective, that would be a shared cost throughout, from where to where down in Friends, with the application back on them.
Generally, stormwater is a general rate, but it's something we can look at whether we target to the same rating district as it's been proposed by regional, which would have to go through our plan process.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Worship. Just picking up on Councillor Cogan's comments, I think that my preference probably would be for us to strike a rate next year and just include it in the community rating zone. Friends, it's inclusive of the community then, and the same for Hokitika for the stormwater, sea and river protections. Rather than apply the rate across the whole district, I don't think Haast and Otira see a direct benefit. They have a distant benefit, but obviously we'll be striking that debt recovery 1st of July 2021 as part of the new adopted LGP. So that's the time to thrash that out then in terms of options. But just to clarify, because I can't keep up with the numbers, read one thing, told another thing, saw another thing in the paper. What is the Friends' Ryan can't talk about the feeling in the the community? Is it 100%? Let's do this.
Never.
Oh, majority big.
The majority of the submissions are in favour of it. The feeling is there are several people who hate the idea.
Yeah.
There are a number of people who think it's a wonderful idea.
Okay.
And
clear as mud sort of view.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just
through your worship, I just want to declare a conflict of interest in this too. So if I can talk about it, that would be good. And whether I'm allowed to vote, it's up to two people.
Well, the question of whether you wish to vote is up to you.
Okay.
And I have no problem with either Councillor Kennedy or yourself speaking to assist in the discussion.
you know that you live in the community and you represent technically. I'm just because looking at it from an outside, there's a lot of money. Ours is a pittance in comparison to what we're getting. To me, it's quite a no-brainer in terms of cents for dollars sort of investment, and the outcomes for that community look very favourable. So I'm curious what the Southern councillors think.
We need it, it needs to be done, but the mechanism is some people are, quite a few people are, just worried about the cost of what it's going to be of the 2 million extra, which is outside of this. But sitting here thinking the people down here are just going to be paying off another 2 million over 10 years or 20 years, I think it is. You've got $250,000 here that's going to be a targeted rate down there. It's pretty harsh on a few residents. As opposed, Hokitik's got a huge rating area. It needs to happen, but the people down there, and you mightn't understand, but they're only having 1 or 2 rooms a night, and half a dozen meals in the restaurant or something like that. It's during good times it would be fine, but it's jolly hard down there. Yeah, but it does need to happen one way or the other, and preferably with less debt the better, you know.
Do you have a few?
Oh, look, I still think I feel I can't talk, but, you know, I just...
It's your call.
Yeah. That's my opinion. I just sorry.
So just to clarify, I support the recommendations, and I think if we have to put the same caveats in, we do. I don't think that will be an issue either. I think it's pretty straightforward to me. We need to do it.
Councillor Hart.
I too fully support the funding is too good to turn down. So, and they, obviously need that down there. So I fully support the 250,000.
Deputy Mayor Carruthers.
Yep, I totally support it.
Councillor Davis.
Yep, I support that. I just, do we need to ask any questions about resource consents on this one at all, or is it all good?
It's a regional council matter.
Is there everything good on it, or?
Well, I'm sure they do everything by the book.
Okay, well, that's the case, all good.
It's not our land though, is it?
Yeah.
Just through your worship, I'll just clarify that in this situation, they won't need resource consent because they're not in the coastal marine area.
Yeah.
Thank you.
From us, resource consent from us.
Councillor Bean.
No, happy with this one, thank you.
Francois.
Look, the cynic in me would say no, and the reason I say that is because, I agree with Paul, in particular, is you're letting non nature take its course. I mean, this was here before anyone was here. People have built where they've built, I think, they've probably got rocks in their head. But anyway, we're here, I hate to give money back to the government, so fucking violence support. The people have built here, right? This was here before then. Same with Hokitika. I mean, we've done it out the path. The sea's already taken us once. We didn't mow or grown. We moved. We moved to another place. It's going to happen again. We're going to move. We ain't going to kick up a fuss about it. We're going to move because we know what to see. So, I do feel for the people on Rebel Street, but they built there. There's a sea at the back door. What do you expect?
Francois, I've spoken to quite a few people on Revell Street who have said the same thing as you. We know the risks, we love living here, and we will live here for the next 20 years, and then we'll move. And they're very accepting that that was their choice, and they go with it. So yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Well, look, we have a proposed resolution, and that is that, there's a suggestion that a similar condition in relation to resource consent.
No, the resource consent's not a condition. The money is just flows for this one, doesn't it?
Okay, we have a recommendation which I'm happy to move. That's A, that council receive the report. B, council approves that the council approve an unbudgeted expenditure of 250,000 plus GST towards the Francis Joseph flood protection infrastructure enhancements. And do I have a second? Councillor Davidson, thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hands. And those against? Councillor against?
I don't think he was against.
Were you against, Hubert?
No, I'm in favour.
I think he was a bit late.
And could you Councillor Hartshall and Councillor Kennedy refrain from voting. Okay. We now move to. I just missed something off the run sheet this morning. This is regards to submissions on 28th of September. We just need to receive it as part of. The item that's before us here is that Council received a report and heard and considered the verbal written submissions in the open part of the meeting and deliberated in the public excluded section in relation to the submissions to the extraordinary council meeting on the 28th of September 2020. So is that the resolution you require? I'm happy to move that resolution. Someone like to?
I'll second it.
Councillor Kennedy, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Thank you. Right, the meeting, it's almost time for a cup of tea, isn't it?
It's lunchtime, isn't it?
I'd ask the, we'll move out of Zoom. Move into public exclusion first. Okay, so I'd like to move that we move into public excluded. Thanks, Councillor Hart.
Yep, Your Worship.
Martin, all those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. And now I'll adjourn the meeting to allow councillors to grab a cup of tea and